It is really my pleasure to be here, and thank you, IASC, for having me here. Dr. Saran talked about Earth and environments, and I'm going to take you beyond the Earth, not just beyond the Earth, beyond our Milky Way in other galaxies. So we'll be talking about exotic stars and their explosions, and I'll start with the comprehensible universe has around 200 billion galaxies. Each galaxy has around 100 billion stars, and stars are being formed in these dark nebulae. And stars are being formed in the quantities of hundreds to thousands. And the beauty of that is, if you study them, you know that they were all formed at the same age. So if you have different kind of stars, you can study their evolution, and it has been seen that if you take stars in a star cluster and try to rearrange them in terms of temperature increasing from right to left and luminosity or intensity increasing upward, they don't occupy random spaces. They are in a very well-defined structure, and different kind of stars occupy different well-defined place in this luminosity temperature diagram, and this is probably the most famous and most useful diagram in stellar evolution, and it is called Hertzsprung-Russell diagram or HR diagram. In this diagram, our little sun is somewhere there, and we all know that sun is giving us energy by hydrogen fusion into helium, and once that happens, and there will be not enough density and pressure, and the sun will stop any kind of fusion in another 4 billion years or so, and it loses outermost envelopes and become a white dwarf, which will occupy that place in the HR diagram. So that's the fate of our sun, but we are not talking about sun at all. We are talking about the stars, which are very massive stars, and they have very high temperature, very high luminosity, and they get enough density and pressure that they not only burn hydrogen, but they also burn much advanced nuclear fusion. They do advanced nuclear fusion and burn heavier elements until the iron core. In this evolutionary stage, they become supergiant, and one of these we know is Betelgeuse in our own galaxy. And if you look at the size of Betelgeuse, the size is orbit of Jupiter, so that's big they become. But the more interesting aspect is that these stars, they will all end their lives in very explosive demise, and that's called a supernova. And this is a topic which is close to my heart, so I study these. And in these supernova explosions, of course, due to the own gravitation collapse, the star will collapse, and this is probably the most extreme physics studying laboratories in our universe, because you cannot create these on our Earth. The energy which is coming out of this supernovae is 10 to the power 29 or 29 orders of magnitude higher than atomic bomb which happened on Earth, or which we can produce on Earth. And these are electrons are reaching extremes of energies, and to tell you this fact that every second in our universe around 8 to 10 supernova explosions are happening and giving rise to this kind of energy. So this is a very extreme fact, and that's why we love to study supernovae. But since I have to connect everything to the Earth, I have to tell you that supernovae are the only sites where these heavier elements are formed. If there were no supernovae, we wouldn't have any oxygen to breathe right now, so we wouldn't be sitting here. So that means when the supernova explosion happens, all these heavier elements which were synthesized inside the star do explode, and they come out in the environment. So we do know that before our solar system was formed, there must have been supernova explosions, and that's why we survive. So anyway, so this is another implication for studying these supernovae. But now the question comes that there is a massive star. We understand that this will explode as a supernova. But how do we complete this gap? How do we understand? We already know that there are so many different kinds of supernovae, so we know that they are following different evolutionary paths. But we have to understand what path. And that is what we are trying to do in our group, and we are trying to understand what kind of different conditions are there which will give rise to different kind of explosions, and what those explosions will look like. So from the massive star evolution perspective, there are some of the things which can affect the evolution is nucleosynthesis, magnetism, and binarity. And in our group, we are currently mostly focusing on magnetism and binarity. And in magnetism, I have to just say a little bit about magnetism. So these are these three different kinds of stars. And what we know is that these less solar mass, less heavier stars do have this convective outermost layer. So electrons are moving, so there is convection going on, and hence it's easy to have magnetic field. That's why stars like our sun do have magnetic field. But these much more massive stars, they are radiative. They should not have magnetic field. But contrary to our expectation, we see in our Milky Way that at least 10% of massive stars have these kilogauss bipolar magnetic fields. We do not understand their origin. We are trying hard to understand, but we do not know. But we do know that they do explain, or they can explain some of the exotic phenomena in our universe, including some of the LIGO black holes and exotic explosions. And what is a better way to understand magnetism than radio emission? And this is what our group is trying to do. We are trying to understand the radio emission from these magnetic stars in terms of gyrosynchrotron and electron cyclotron maser emission. And currently we are focusing more on electron cyclotron maser emission, which is 100% circularly polarized, and that comes because of anisotropy in the electron distribution from the magnetic null of the star. So that's a star and the magnetosphere. And we expect these kind of, okay, it's not working, but we expect these kind of emission circularly polarized from here. And inspired by this, we did a survey with the GMRT, the Indian Radio Telescope, Giant Meter Wave Radio Telescope, to understand this electron cyclotron maser emission. And this is one of the example of what kind of data we were getting. This was Bernali Das's thesis, and she finished in 2021. And in her survey of 35 stars, she ended up discovering 14 stars, and I have to say that there are currently only 18 stars which are known to have electron cyclotron maser emission, and 14 have been discovered by Bernali with our Indian telescope GMRT. And this work was so significant that Bernali received the TIFR's Best Physics Thesis Award, as well as Astronomical Society of India's Best Astronomy Thesis Award. So her work has been really influential, and it is, I would say, every time a moment of pride when your student surpasses you. So I'm very, very proud of her work. So she has done really great work. And we have not just stick to this, we are trying to do physics with this. We are trying to understand the magnetic topologies of these stars, trying to understand the environments, because electron cyclotron maser emission is a very sensitive function of the densities. We are also trying to understand the binary system with magnetic fields, and with the data from GMRT and MEERKAT, which is a radio telescope in South Africa. We have tried to we have seen that wherever there are these magnetic reconnections in these magnetic line fields, we do see this radio emission. This is a coherent radio emission again. This is ongoing work, and we do not understand where the radio emission is coming from, but this formed Ayan Vishwas's PhD thesis when I was still at NCRA until 2.5 years ago. Currently, I am at NRO, and I am running this Chasers group, and I have this set of excellent students who are doing this amazing work. And in this work, we are trying to approach from the post-explosion perspective and trying to understand which star is going to become which kind of supernova. And the technique we are using is this novel, I call it time machine technique. It's called circumstellar interaction. So the idea is that stars are losing mass because their outermost layers are less gravitationally bound. And in our Milky Way studies, we have seen that the mass loss rate from the stars are pretty amazing, and they are dependent upon the escape velocity. So this means these winds which are lost from the stars are moving with around 10 kilometers per second or 100 kilometers per second. Now when the star explodes, the explosion ejecta moves with tens of thousands of kilometers per second. Now imagine it's going into this wind which was lost before the star exploded. and it is moving with 1000 kilometers per second. It's simply like, you don't like my talk, you start running, but I come behind you with a scooter, I catch up much faster. Which means if I do an observation one day after the explosion, I am catching how the star was losing mass 1000 days before explosion. If I am studying 1 year after the explosion, I am catching 1000 years before the explosion. And this is why I'm calling it time machine, and this is the study we are doing right now. And what happens when this ejector hits the medium, it creates these shock waves, and in these shock waves temperature become very high and it creates X-ray emission, and also it can emits radio emission and multiple emission in multiple bands. So for the radio studies, we are using GMRT, we are using Australian telescope, we are using Atacama Large Millimeter Array in Chile, and we are using the VLA in USA. And the radio emission is coming from the shock because electrons are accelerated. Just to give you a ballpark number, electron which has around 511 kilo electron volt energy, it has to reach to GeV energy to produce synchrotron emission at 1 gigahertz. So it means electrons are really reaching relativistic energies and producing synchrotron emission, and since radio is the lowest frequency, we see it for a very long time. And the thing is, the beauty is that in Milky Way we know that different stars at different evolutionary stages, we know how they evolve. So this is when we study these supernovae, this is a compilation of several supernovae. When we study their light curves, by studying their light curves and modeling, we can predict what kind of star is giving rise to what kind of supernova. And that's really amazing. We have focused on low frequency emission. This was Nayana's thesis. Nayana is, she was my student at NCRA, but right now she's a postdoc at Berkeley, and she's doing amazingly well. She focused on this low frequency part of the radio studies, because this is where different kind of absorptions are happening, which is giving rise to different kind of physics, such as environments, mass loss rate, magnetic field, the shock velocities, and so on and so forth. And she did really amazing work, and this work is being, we are taking it forward. And currently with GMRT, we are running this GLIMPSE program, GMRT low frequency investigation of progenitors of supernova, and it has been very successful program. And for X-ray studies, we are using all these space-based telescopes because X-rays cannot reach Earth. So all these, most of these telescopes are NASA telescopes, except XMM Newton, which is European telescope. And X-ray emission comes because the plasma is super duper hot, and that's why. But it does give a lot of information depending upon whether the plasma is adiabatic or radiative. So this is just one example, and this is a little bit old study, but I wanted to give you example because this tells you that how one can derive science. And the thing is that this kind of study is extremely difficult because space-based telescopes are extremely difficult to get time. This was probably my only proposal, or maybe only supernova so far, where we got 6 epochs of Chandra X-ray telescope time. But the beauty is that you can see within like few days and few years, the spectrum is so different. And this spectrum gives information about the line of sight column densities. It means it is telling you the atmosphere. And if you look at the days since explosion, it's 1000 days. And just multiply it by 1000, and that's what we are probing, the progenitor history and how the environment is changing of these progenitors. More recently, we have done the study of a very close by supernovae. This is again Chandra. By the way, this Chandra is not my name. This is the name of the telescope. Please remember that. So this is the Chandra X-ray telescope spectra, and again, by studying the X-ray and combining with the radio data, which we took with VLA, GMRT, and many other telescopes, and combining with the optical telescope, we are able to recreate this whole progenitor evolution history for a very long time. So this is kind of science we are able to do, and my current student Raphael is able to He is focusing on multi-wavelength studies of supernovae, and this is one example where he has used optical, infrared, radio, X-ray data to understand. And what we are understanding is that the explosion which is happening is not happening in a spherically symmetric medium. With more data, we don't have to model a spherical cow. We can start to model a realistic cow, and that's what we are starting to do in our group. ELISA is focusing on much later epochs where hardly any data exists. As you can see, this is only one supernova which has been observed for that long, and from these studies we are able to see that in some particular supernovae the mass loss starts much heavier. Mass loss starts even in the helium burning stages and those kind of things. So it's really impressive work. She's just going to submit her paper very soon. The other thing which we are focusing, this was our work in 2023. We were working with ALMA millimeter telescope in Chile, and we were expecting to see the dimming flux, but we actually saw the rebrightening, which was very surprising. And then Anika is working on this to understand that how you get, instead of dimming, you get the rebrightening. And how we understand is that star was, when it was exploding, it had a binary companion which was creating this shell of mass loss which stayed far away, and when the shock moved in this direction, this is where, when the shock moved, it is where the rebrightening happened. So this is really, and that was early work in 2023 when we did. Now Anika is extending those studies with Chandra telescope and VLA and GMRT telescope, and we are trying to make a coherent picture with this. So I would just say that when we started this work, we have been able to see the many rich histories of progenitor evolution, asymmetric environments, multiple shocks, enhanced mass loss rate, inhomogeneities. We are able to do science of energy budgets of how much energy is going in electrons and magnetic field, and this work is still going on and it's really exciting. But I did want to say one thing, since I have 1 minute and 29 seconds. I wanted to say that the richness of universe doesn't end here. Every supernova which is gravitation collapse supernova makes a neutron star, and when these neutron stars merge, that's when the watershed events of the centuries happen. And that's what happened in 2017 when two neutron stars merged. They created gravitational wave as well as electromagnetic wave, and for the first time and the only time we saw emissions from all the frequencies. And we saw it in gravitational wave, we saw it with gamma rays, X-rays, optical and everything. And in fact, the work which came out had 4,000 co-authors. It's probably I'm one of those, you can't see me, but this is probably the largest collaboration on this planet universe, and it did tell us a lot about cosmology, and it tells us gravitational waves exist and they move with the speed of light. And I would end my talk is that this is the...
You had highlighted your name there.
Oh, sorry. So I don't know how is it not. No, the names were at the back side, There were just so many co-authors, independent collaboration. I know that high energy physics people are used to having the large collaboration, but this was exotic phenomena. Anyway, so I wanted to say that this is what we are trying to understand: explosions, second explosions, and studying them. And this simple picture of supernovae classification, our work we have converted into a much more comprehensive picture, and we have just submitted this work, and we are now defining supernova instead of optical spectrum, but based on interaction in radio and X-ray band. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Poonam Chandra, for a very fascinating as well as very frightening scenario about our universe.
Thank you.
It's really frightening to say that, when a star explodes, the explosive strength is somewhere around several orders of magnitude of an atomic bomb. I didn't know that.
For a very short time.
I know. Particularly about the sun, I was listening to that. It's not going to go away in 100 years. So we are not going to be there, So
That fraction of a second is enough to destroy us, by the way.
I just wanted to make one more remark before I, leave this talk for questions. You said about Chandra's telescope. I told you about Dr. Chandrasekhar's
Yes,
name.
yes.
So when your last name is Chandra, but I guess National Radio Astronomy Observatory will soon have a Poonam telescope. Not to confuse with Chandra, not Chandra too, but Poonam. I congratulate you for an excellent talk, and now it's open for discussion.
Thank you.
I have another simple question. So you said the heavier stars, much larger than sun, have some of them have a dipole magnetic field. So what is the reason for this?
Yeah.
And also the second question is, all the stars don't have this dipole magnetic field, all the larger ones. So is it a part of the life cycle of the stars?
Yeah, so I would say that there has been a lot of studies on this, and this is still an open question. So there are two, after tons of surviving theories, tons of theories have survived. One is the fossil field, means the nebula which is forming the star itself has a slightly higher magnetic field than other nebulae, and when this is condensing, it is creating. But the problem with that model is that not all stars show this kind of magnetic field. We have studied the stars in binary, and we see that one star has magnetic field, the other doesn't have magnetic field. So that doesn't fit with the fossil theory. The other is people are saying mergers of stars. If two stars merge, the differential rotation of the star can create this stable dipolar magnetic field. There is no proof of that, but that's true for astronomy. You get just bunch of photons and you have just handful of physics laws, and you try to derive all these big things in the universe, but that's how the physics work. But simulations have been done, and simulations have shown that you can actually create these stable dipolar magnetic fields by merger of stars. But this is again work still under simulation, and we still are studying those kind of things and seeing if some observational clues come for that.
Maybe we can take one more question. Yeah.
Any impact on Earth's climate? Because as a geologist, we learned that past supernova impacted Earth's climate, where the Earth's climate warmed and
We are nowhere close to Earth. We are nowhere close to Milky Way. The last supernova in Milky Way happened in 400 years ago. And so we are in far away galaxies. It doesn't affect. We had done some studies, and if a supernova is 30 parsecs away, then it may affect little bit. But in 2004, there was an explosion had happened in a soft gamma ray repeater, which had, if you were listening to radios at that time, it did affect the ionosphere of Earth. But that's the closest we have gotten so far. So we are safe.
I think we shall thank Dr. Poonam for an excellent presentation.
Thanks.